Hello, and welcome back to the Creative Practitioner podcast. My name's Jonathan Curtis. I'm here with Paul.
Hi, Johnny. Good to see you.
Good to see you. We've had a bit of a hiatus. We're on season 2 now of this podcast.
Indeed.
Season 1, we were just looking at the dates, finished Christmas time.
Yes.
December 2024. That's when the last one was released.
Yep.
And it's just come into May. The birds are tweeting. The sun's out. Had a bit of a hiatus. I think we've both been quite busy over the last few months.
Yeah. Obviously, halfway into quarter 2. I'm not entirely sure what happened to quarter 1.
I know.
But yes, busy to say the least.
Which is good. Considering everything we've talked about, that's a good problem to have, isn't it?
It is. It is.
So we'll crack straight on. We won't mince words with preamble. We're diving straight into the business aspect today, aren't we? We did the last 3 episodes of last season. I think we got quite conceptual about the business, didn't we?
Yeah.
And we're both looking at, we've got a copy of the book here in front of us today, The Creative Practitioner. I'm looking at page 159, which is part 5 of the book, and it deals with the business aspect of running a business in the arts industries.
Yes.
And the heading is planning a business venture.
Yes.
And I think this is going to form the core of what we talk about today, isn't it?
Indeed it is.
And I'm going to start it off with a conundrum that I faced, that I think a lot of people in that position struggle with. You've thought about it, you've got your creative practice, you've got your skill, your art form, and you've decided you want to do this for a living. You've decided you want to go into business and trade as an artist.
Mm-hmm.
And let's just, for now, put aside the bureaucracy and the administration and say it's Monday morning, 9 o'clock, and you're ready to go.
Yeah.
What do you actually do? Like what? Because for me as a drummer, very little of my time is actually playing the drums.
Yeah.
And I'm 15 years into this career, I've kind of got a good idea of what I need to do day in, day out. But when you're day one, year one, what do we do to get ourselves started as a business, as a creative practitioner that is active and trading and hopefully financially viable?
Yeah. There are themes that practitioners will face, and they're overlooked. They're overlooked at one's peril. So it doesn't matter whether you are teaching, performing. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the product or service is. You have to be able to tell your story to another person. And in this part of the book, it's geared towards writing a business plan.
Mm-hmm.
But in other settings, it could be writing an application for funding.
Yep.
You, the reader, the practitioner, you will be asked some very pertinent questions that we've thought about in this part of the book that will help answer those questions. Because if you can't succinctly describe who you are and what you're doing and who it's for, then how can you know what to do with it, let alone somebody else?
I think it's interesting how you have highlighted the personal story. At the very top of the page here on 159, it says, what will the business sell?
Yeah.
How will the business make money?
Yeah.
And I think it's really interesting that you have gone to the personal aspect, the story of who you are, before we've answered that question.
Yeah, I used to say this, and I've heard you say this, and I think I've got it wrong. I'll let you decide whether, you know, but we there is a mindset that says that the purpose of being in business is to make money.
Yeah.
Well, there's a new challenge to that now, which is one I tend to subscribe to. More and more enterprises exist to do good.
Yeah.
We exist, I think, in the arts to do good for ourselves and for others. And if you govern yourself properly, which is what the business is, we are stewards of that vehicle.
Yeah.
We have to be compliant and all of the rest of it, and we will and should get onto that. If you manage it and take care of it, it can take care of you.
Does that risk being too rose tinted for somebody who doesn't yet have a vehicle? You know, when you are in our position, it's a little bit easier to talk about doing good. If you are, let's just say you're 22 years old or whatever, and you're just out of college, or maybe even just out of your parents' house or something, and you are desperate to go and make a name for yourself and a living for yourself in your chosen field, but you just don't know how, and you have nothing on the books. You know, you have no turnover, no cash, no capital, no assets. Can a person in that position afford to think in such idealistic terms?
Let's find out.
Or is that actually a necessity from the beginning? Because if you don't, you're going into it with the wrong mindset, perhaps.
Well, so I think we should look at the introspective and customer facing questions that we ask on page 165
in order to answer
yeah
the questions about what we sell and how we make money.
Because when it comes to presenting a business plan or an application for funding or even writing copy for a website, until you know who you are, what you stand for and what you're doing, you're not even going to be able to identify if there are other people or companies doing that.
Right.
If there are customers that actually
a market for it,
want that.
Yeah.
And I think that's where people get it wrong unintentionally. Because as you said at the top of this, where do you start?
Yeah.
And you start with yourself.
Right.
I believe.
That's often overlooked, isn't it?
Yeah, because people jump straight to the end.
Yeah.
Like I do advocate that you start with the end in mind, but you've got you once you know what your goal is, you've then got to peel it back.
Yeah. How do you get there?
Yeah. And how long, and how long it might be dictated by how much money is it going to cost.
Yeah.
And so on.
Do you take my concern though about somebody right at the very beginning with no money and no cash flow? Would you still say to a person in that position, look, you have to start here. You have to start introspectively.
Yeah.
Is it that important, that foundational?
Yeah.
Why? I know you've just answered that. I'm trying to be really succinct about why this is such an important...
Well, philosophically, I suppose, if you don't know where you're going, you're never going to get there, are you?
But if you...
But it can change along the way.
I guess this is part of the dichotomy with running a business, because a business does exist to make money. But as we've talked about in previous episodes and elsewhere, there is an aspect of business that's about sustaining a lifestyle and making you happy as an artist.
Now that's an interesting point.
Yeah.
Because yes, the business has to make money and it exists to make money. Why?
Well, it's a necessary evil, isn't it? The art doesn't exist if you can't afford to make it.
Is it a necessary evil? Is it this business has to make money to sustain the people that own it so that we can carry on making art?
Yeah. If I don't make enough money, I can't keep producing art.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not a necessary evil. It's just a fundamental requirement.
It's just a requirement. It's just a necessary.
Yeah, it's just a necessary. Yeah.
So we're looking at 165 here.
Yeah.
And I remember this was all you. You were really big on this section. You've got two columns, and on the one side are introspective questions, and on the other side are customer-facing questions that are linked to the first. And I think you're suggesting here, in order to answer the customer-facing question, you've got to first answer the introspection. Yeah.
You see, I'm hesitating here because I've got like a flash of three different types of scenarios, because you've got the creative practitioner that makes art for its own sake, and might need a business to protect it, whether it's copyright, or
rights holders and things like that,
or there might be funding in play to facilitate that. So a set of accounts might need to be produced, or whatever. So the business in that regard might just exist for governance and compliance. If you are a service provider, and by that I mean somebody who a service provider, by that I mean somebody who teaches another person or performs for and with,
Yeah.
you provide a service for another.
Yeah.
If you're going to make the leap into self-employment, why would you do it unless you were going to enjoy it?
Sure.
And that's regardless of service.
Yeah.
A very passionate conversation last week with somebody who's trying to sell me life insurance.
Right.
Not something I'm passionate about.
No.
But I was very convinced that the person I was speaking with felt and understood the market because they knew what they
knew what they were talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was convincing. And it gave me a certain level of confidence.
Yeah, sure.
So the introspect of who am I, it's a little bit deeper than what the business card might say. It might do Jonathan Curtis, drummer.
Yeah.
Great, but then the menu drops, doesn't it?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So within that, you then say, well, the customer facing is, well, I've identified who I am and what I want to offer. Who then are my customers?
Because I suppose the nature of who you are informs the nature of what you offer, which informs the nature of people that want that.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a supply chain.
Yeah.
In order to figure out the market, you have to figure out the product, and in order to figure out the product, you have to figure out the origin, which is you.
Yeah. And ask the question. Be okay in not knowing the answer immediately. Be okay in the answer changing periodically.
So back on 159, we've got the question of what will the business sell, and you've in the last 10 minutes you've used the terms products and services numerous times. That's the staple of the business, isn't it? Yeah. The product and the services are the things you literally sell in exchange for money. And it seems obvious that this hypothetical person in the situation I've described, well, first of all, they need to sit down with a pen and paper and write out the services they're going to sell and the products they're going to sell. So they've got an idea of where that money's going to come from. But it seems what you're suggesting here is, in order to answer those questions, we need to start with these introspective questions. So you've said, who am I? What services will I offer, but why? Why am I offering these services?
Yeah.
Why do we need to answer that? Is it not obvious? This is, I'm playing devil's advocate. Why is this not obvious?
There's assumed knowledge can be dangerous. It can be costly. So if we follow down on page 165, who am I? What services will I offer? Where will I offer my services?
Yeah.
In person? Will I need a studio?
So they're very practical ramifications of the answers to this.
And it will help you quantify cost. Not necessarily immediately, but it will help you quantify the cost of setting up the business, the cost of running the business.
Yeah.
That will have an impact on the cost of what you need to charge.
And I suppose there's also a sense of, if you know yourself, you know the things you like, you know the things you dislike. If you know you thrive in a one-to-one environment and you don't like crowds, it's going to make you think differently about the prospect of teaching peripatetically in a busy school.
Exactly that. It will help you identify, perhaps more importantly, what you don't want to do.
Right, because you've just said we've got to love it. Otherwise, why are we doing it? I remember my mum said to me once, why don't you do more peripatetic work? Because it's good money. And I remember thinking, well, yeah, it is, but there are easier ways to make money. If I'm just going about getting the money, I could go and get an office job for even more money. I can go be an accountant for even more money.
Yeah.
As much as I love working with children and I enjoy the occasional peripatetic work, it's not what I want to do all the time. It's not why I do what I do. And this was basically what I explained to her. I said, well, it's nice, a bit of supplementary income from time to time, But if I'm going to spend 5 days a week teaching peripatetically in a school, I may as well go and become an employed teacher and get all the benefits and a pension.
But I think we need to bring that story back round to the realization in our last season where we are perpetuating a lifestyle.
Right. And that has to be front and center, doesn't it? I've talked about her before, my friend who's training to be a nutritionist. And she has spent years in the private sector, good money, good security, good pension, all this sort of stuff. And she's not been very happy. And she's been treated badly by her company, and she's left that job now, thankfully. And she's becoming very, very close to setting up her own business and doing it for real. And because she wants to.
Yeah.
She's passionate about the industry she's moving into. She's learning to become really knowledgeable about it. But she is still worried about the finances. And that's the balance. That's one of the difficulties, isn't it, of going into this field, or any field, and it's not unique to the arts. But if you can't say you're doing it because you want to, surely it's just easier to go and get a 9-to-5 and have the security.
Yeah, and you've got to start with yourself, because who am I needs to be deeper than who am I the practitioner.
Right.
What are my personal circumstances? Do I have partner, children, house, car, debt?
And do I want those things?
Do I have them? Do I want them?
Yeah, kids, for example.
Yeah.
That's not a consideration when you're 22.
No.
It might be when you're 32 or 42.
But if you can quantify who you are and what your circumstances are, and what you want to achieve, let's say in the next 5 years, because time moves ever so quickly. Like here we are in May. We didn't plan to have 4 complete months off this project.
No.
But life gets in the way. So if you can come up with they say like a 2, 5 and 10 year plan.
Yeah.
I think a 10-year plan is really difficult at the moment because the world is changing too quickly.
Yeah.
But if you just stay with who am I, if you can identify what you might want to achieve yourself in the next 5 years in your lifestyle, then quantify that, then you'll know actually if you can take the next steps.
So let's try to bring this back. Excuse me. Let's try to bring this back to a really pragmatic thing. Then we're talking about, or I'm pushing this idea of a hypothetical person who's really keen to get started.
Yeah.
Seems like we're saying to just take the foot off the gas for a moment and take the time to consider these introspective questions. To what extent should those answers inform the business and the customer-facing answers? And to what extent should we let the necessities of the business maybe override or push back a little bit at some of those answers? Because the reality is there are sometimes going to be things that we have to do in a business sense that we might not like.
Yeah.
We might not want to do. So that surely there's a degree of hard work and elbow grease and digging in at times when we don't really want to.
Yeah, but you must put yourself first.
That's the ultimate theme, isn't it?
Yeah, and I don't mean in a selfish sense. I just mean in a self-serving sense. Like you have to protect yourself because if it takes you all week to earn your income, do you have the time to do this?
And are you going to enjoy that week?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I would advocate people be a little bit more risk adverse at the moment. So I would advocate that you have. Let's say you're adamant you're going to be a professional, a creative practitioner.
Yeah.
I would advocate that you start in a part-time sense.
Yeah, and transition across.
Across.
So can I put you on the spot a little bit then?
Yeah.
Let's put this to the test. Let's imagine my hypothetical person is a budding guitarist. And let's put aside their skill. Let's just assume they're very skillful.
Yeah.
How should this person start then to transition from somebody who has always just played as a hobby to somebody who wants to do it full time, work in the music industry with all the bells and whistles that come with that, and make it a sustainable business for themselves.
Yeah.
Monday, week one, day one.
Yeah.
What sort of things are you advocating that person can do?
So the first thing that person should do is view themselves as a center point of a circle.
Right.
And then literally take a 360-degree view of what's around them.
Right.
What opportunities might be around them. Then from a kind of radius perspective, a radial perspective, start spidering out.
Right.
Well, how far might I have to go to do a gig that's worthy of a fee? Or where might I have to go to teach?
So already you've highlighted a couple of products there, because being a freelance gigger is a service.
Yeah.
Giving a lesson is a product or service, it doesn't matter what we call it. Is it presumably by answering the introspective questions, you can start to list those products and services that are available to you now, and the products and services that you might like to offer in the future, and look at the path to market for both of those.
Yeah.
What have I got available to sell now? And what do I need to do in order to make those products and services available to sell in the future?
Yeah, and then do exactly the same exercise for competitor analysis.
Right. See, that scares me. Those two words scare me. What do you mean by competitor analysis?
Well, we need to do armchair and field research. Asking a search engine will give you results, but it won't give you a true indication of what's going on.
Right.
So, competitor analysis. Start putting in favourite search terms into a search engine and start actually seeing how many people are offering what you do within a radius of where you are.
So if you're a guitarist but there are 60 other guitarists in your locality,
Yeah.
that's going to affect the products and services you offer and how you offer them.
Yeah, but you need to be both sides of the fence all the time. You need to be objective and say, wow, there's a lot of competition.
Yeah.
But wow, there's a lot of opportunity.
Right. Because that's the local industry is obviously supporting.
Yeah, they're there for a reason.
Right. So while you were talking then, I was flicking ahead. We've got a section on competitor analysis on page 175 here.
Yeah.
And you talk about the armchair analysis and also the very outward facing. You know, we've got a hypothetical person here called Lucy who's a singer.
Mm-hmm.
So it's exactly what you've just said. She's looking at other singers in the area, what they offer.
Yeah.
But also that she's highlighted weaknesses in the other singers. I think looking at the paragraph here, her research shows her that local singers offer little in the way of online tuition.
Yeah.
So it's just, as you've said, we're sort of highlighting an opportunity here.
Yeah.
So maybe our guitarist is particularly good at jazz, and he sees that there are very few jazz-focused guitarists in the area.
Yeah, that's right. And also challenge your own conscious and subconscious biases.
Yeah.
So I've got colleagues and friends who really push back with regard to online teaching. And that's okay.
Mm.
But there's an entire community of people out there, home education. For one reason or another, they might not be able to come to you. So you can use technology to break down that barrier, and that can become a unique selling point.
So, as I'm scrolling through this section here, in this case study of Lucy the singer,
Yeah.
we've got competitor analysis, products and services, customers, marketing analysis, marketing, supply chain, business plans, time management, financing. There's a lot there.
Yeah.
How much of that needs to be considered from the get-go before you start, and how much can you start to develop along the way? Because I know for my personal career path, I very rarely in the beginning considered those sorts of things, and maybe that was to my detriment.
No. I mean, I didn't even know any of these terms existed.
Right.
These, you know, you and I were talking earlier about routes to market.
Yeah.
And that is impactful because you can literally prospect. You can literally put a stake in the ground and say, guitarist, guitar lessons.
Yeah.
And hopefully people will go, ooh, and come
yeah.
along. And that's okay.
Yeah.
That's all right. If one of your proposed routes to market is to try and get money from an institution,
Right.
a startup
Fund or something.
fund,
Yeah. Yeah.
a bank,
Yeah.
they're going to want to know this.
They need that. So that has very little to do with art, does it? I mean, this is the fact that our person is a singer or guitarist is kind of irrelevant for that side. How much of these things? I mean, we in Lucy's case, and certainly for our guitarist case, I get the sense that marketing yourself as a music teacher, a singing teacher, or a dance teacher, or whatever it may be, is going to be a lot easier than the other aspect, which a lot of musicians specifically are interested in, which is getting into the performance side. Because you can put a stake or a flyer in the newspaper or whatever for guitar lessons.
Yeah.
Doing the same thing for freelance guitarist for hire for gigs and session work.
Yeah.
It's not going to yield anything realistically.
No.
How much of this consideration, you know, I'm imagining this young guitarist here, very frustrated, trying to get gigs, trying to get his or her name out there as a player, and saying, yes, I know how to found a teaching practice, may already have a few part-time students already.
Yeah.
How do I apply this business acumen, these introspective questions and these products and services? How do I apply that to the real seemingly infallible prospect of or process of getting a gig or getting booked as a performer, as a player, as a dancer, not as a dance teacher, as a dancer? Do you see what I mean? That seems to be a dark art.
It does, but you have to go back to, you know, that list of questions earlier in this section where it's like
the introspection.
Yeah, who am I? What services am I going to offer? Then you need to understand the parameters of each of those markets.
So it's understanding how that market works.
Yeah.
Yeah, because as I just said, you can't put a flyer in a newspaper and prospect for gigs that way.
No, and with that, the market, although there will be fundamentals and norms and trends, it will work very differently in a seaside town versus London versus Nottingham versus you. That's what I meant by like standing in the centre of your own circle and just looking around you.
Bit of awareness of where you are.
Yeah, and how it works, and is there a business? Is there a business?
But that takes time, doesn't it? And it can be it can be a chicken and egg scenario, because you might need to spend some time in the local industry, the local scene, to get a sense of how it works. But if you don't know how it works, you can't get that initial time in the industry, and breaking in is always the hardest part, isn't it?
Yeah, but like we have a mutual friend who's a phenomenally successful performing musician.
Yeah.
And he has to do that by being all over the world.
Yeah.
That's his market. I sadly, I don't think he could enjoy that success here.
No, putting roots down in one place stymies that ability, doesn't it?
Yeah. So you have to accept that, and by that I do mean accept that. But if after some very primitive research you come back and say, well, I would love to do that, but I can't do that here.
Yeah.
You have to accept that.
Yeah, that's something that's come to me in encroaching middle age, allowing myself to not want that lifestyle that I thought I wanted when I was younger, you know, the touring the world all the time. I remember I used to be really into the band Slipknot when I was younger, and as I've said to you before, I was in a metal band of my own and really wanted to tour the world as a metal musician. with this band I was in. I idolized Slipknot at the time. And I remember reading an interview with Sean, I think Sean Crahan, I may have mispronounced that, but he's one of the percussionists, and it's kind of his band. He's one of the founding members, and he said even early on, when they were just breaking into the mainstream, they're on the road like 260 odd days a year.
Yeah.
And he was already, I think, older than I am now. He was mid to late 30s when he started that, and he had kids. And I remember he was interviewed in Kerrang or Metal Hammer or something like that, and said, it's horrible. I'm away from my kids 200 and something days of the year, but that's the price for being in a touring rock band.
Yeah.
And I think you react very differently to that when you're 22 and unburdened compared to now when I've got a young family. And if you offered me now, you can be the new drummer of Slipknot, but I don't think I could take it, realistically. And me 10, 15 years ago might be screaming at myself going, what are you doing?
But that's what I meant earlier by saying like don't go further than a 5-year hence version of yourself.
Yeah.
Who am I?
Yeah.
Nobody's introspective like that. It's all about, well, I want to do that.
That's, I think, hard to do when you talked about industry norms, social expectations. A lot of musicians, to take musicians as an example, a lot of them feel, I think, obliged to do certain things because that's the perception of what a musician should do.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily always a good personal choice, and it's not even necessarily a good business choice.
No.
So I think you're right. Having, I think, a little bit of introspection and self-reflection, you could say, well, as a guitarist, I should be gigging this much and touring this much.
Yeah.
But as a person, I don't want to.
No, and your the mistake that a person might make is getting their information from popular culture.
Mm.
If we're watching documentaries of our favourite bands or reading interviews of our favourite bands, they're selling us the destination, the dream, not the hard work.
Yeah. The finished product.
Yeah.
The shiny on stage glamour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also a lot of these people didn't even consider business. They just did it.
Yeah.
We live in a much more regulated time. You need to conform and take care of business. You know. It's simple market research will tell you. You might not like the answer, but you must accept it. If it will also tell you if what you want to offer is even required.
If it's viable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Needed.
Yeah. I remember on a number of occasions, I've sat down and listed all of the things I could sell.
Yeah.
Drum lessons, live work, session work, recording, engraving, composing, books, etc. And then tried to order them based on what I enjoyed the most.
Yes.
What I wanted to do more of, what I wanted to do less of, what was financial. And you end up with a matrix of, this is really viable, but I don't enjoy it.
Yeah.
This, I love it, but there's not much of a market for it. Yeah. How do I, that's something I wonder if, while valuable and important, I'm looking through our book here at all these very academic models.
Yeah.
Is there a worry that sometimes gets in the way of just doing something?
It does, but let's just go. It does, and that's why, regardless of whether you do this professionally or not, I strongly advocate that you do it part-time or in your spare time to begin with.
Right.
Because doing it for the love of it and for the fun of it and for its own sake is key.
Yeah.
If you start putting tremendous pressure on yourself to deliver and tremendous pressure on yourself financially, you'll fall out of love with it and you might not succeed. The biggest thing that you need, regardless of all of this academic context and content, the biggest thing that you need is resilience. You need time, and if you don't give yourself that time to carry on with your craft, perfecting your art, but time to understand the market, if you fit in the market, you know, we talk about it in the beginning of the book as well, like how many graduates there are in the arts every single year.
Yeah.
Now, not all of those will come into the sector. They'll you know they'll transpose those skills into other sectors.
Yeah.
Fine, but if you've got a young person who's gone the university or vocational route, they've got critical thinking, new ideas, new skills, and they're hungry. And then we're also there's people like you and I that kind of went another way around. I don't know if it's better or worse. It's just that's the path that we took.
Well, this is what I was hinting at earlier when I said how much of this should be a conscious, you know, pen and paper, writing this stuff out at the very beginning compared to figuring it out a little bit as you go along. Because I feel for most of my early career, and even for a lot of, you know, not so long ago, a lot of it, you're kind of blundering around in the dark a little bit. You know what you want to try and do, and you're just trying all these things until something sticks.
Yeah.
And I imagine that's common for a lot of people. But at the same time, when you're talking about business, especially if you're a limited company, you get some things wrong, and that's just a fine. You know, you get fined from HMRC or something. And some things you can't afford to blunder around with.
Yeah.
Tax returns or safety.
Yeah.
Things like that. So I guess I'm trying to come back a little bit to this idea of somebody right at the very beginning. When you go through this chapter here, there are pages and pages of things to consider. I mean, it must be overwhelming. And but at the same time, I know many of these things I implemented later on. Yeah. As I went.
Well, so just to answer that really quickly, I suppose, is know who you are and learn to say no. I can't, like, so as an example, if somebody asked me to engrave something for them, I would say that's not something I do, and I'd probably advise that they speak to you. I am not.
So saying yes for its own sake.
Yeah, I'm not saying yes because there's a fee.
Yeah,
I can't do it.
Yeah.
You know, my business doesn't offer that.
So when we advance a little bit, page 180, we get onto professional practice.
Yeah.
We start talking about the health and safety executive, safeguarding. To kind of continue from my previous question or previous line of thought, insurance, types of insurance. Are these things that somebody has to consider day one? I guess in certain situations, isn't it? If someone's coming to your house for a guitar lesson.
Yeah, you'd be crazy not to.
You'd be crazy, yeah, because they trip on your stairs and break their leg.
Yeah.
You're liable.
And we live in blame culture.
We live in liable culture, don't we?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm sure we both know tons of music teachers and other creatives who have conducted business and those things haven't been in place.
Yeah.
Considered.
Yeah.
I've been to people's studios where they have students and it's been a death trap. You're down at the bottom of some rickety stairs and there's floor to ceiling boxes piled up and
they charge the same money.
And they charge the same money, right. So that has an impact on the big theme of last season, which was professionalization, doesn't it? Because imagine if you're a parent and you're paying £40 an hour for your child to go to a drum lesson or a guitar lesson, and the first time you take them to that studio or house or wherever, it's poorly lit, it's rickety stairs, it's messy. Yeah. You start thinking, well, where's the fire exit if something goes wrong down here? That doesn't look good for you, does it, as a business?
No, and then, you know, so the consumer ought to make a choice at that point. You're either you either accept it or challenge it.
Yeah.
For yourself as a creative practitioner, and this is the point of the book, really. to do business for a long time, you need to do it well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So know that there are going to be costs associated, and of which, but also there is common sense involved in making a working environment a safe environment. There are common senses in that, but you want to protect yourself, and again, you know, within professional practice, that in this section of the book we talk about the types of insurance that you might need to consider. And the reason I say consider is because it's not a legal requirement to have insurance.
No.
It's just consider it.
It's probably just good sense.
It's good practice.
Good practice.
Yeah.
So our hypothetical guitarist who's woken up 9 o'clock Monday morning,
Yeah.
and they're cracking their knuckles and they're ready to go, do they need a safeguarding procedure?
It depends on what they're doing.
What they want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If they want to teach a young or vulnerable adult, yeah.
And you wouldn't know that necessarily at first. If you put your flyer in the local marketplace, you don't know whether your first phone call is going to be a young or vulnerable person or the world's best guitarist who's looking for a bit of a brush up.
But I think because of people like us, books like this, podcasts like this, there's no reason why you shouldn't know anymore. Because, you know, this will be one of many sources where you can get this kind of information.
Yeah.
Which brings me around to a point that keeps us in business, is that if you're thinking about it, get a good mentor, get a good coach.
Yeah.
You know, you do this. You do that to learn your art or your skill in life. Well, running a business is it's only hard if you're not prepared.
So how does a mentor differ from a teacher then?
It's a good question, and I have thought about it. A teacher facilitates the learning and expansion of a skill. So there is you and I, and then there is the unknown, the zone of proximal learning.
Yeah.
You know, and I know the answer and you don't.
Yeah.
And then I have a choice. I either tell you the answer or help you discover it.
Yeah.
And then in mentorship, it's the above, but perhaps access to.
Right. Okay.
So access to networks, career opportunities, support, guidance.
Mentorship is rarely a black and white relationship, is it?
That's right.
You don't generally ring someone up and say, hello, how much do you charge for mentorship?
No. But you could argue that you and I have that relationship, and it's reciprocal.
Well, I think we did for a long time, if not still, because you were a drum teacher that I paid for lessons each week. But beyond a certain point, I remember I would call you and say, look, what do you think I should do in this situation?
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on this? And that's where it goes beyond just being a drum teacher, doesn't it?
Yeah. And then I know I've messaged you and said, how do I do a podcast?
How do I do this? Yeah. I'll let you know.
Yeah.
So our young guitarist looking to break into the scene, probably quite a good step is to try to ingratiate themselves with people that are already in the scene.
Yeah, collaborate,
strike up a friendship.
Yeah, don't just collaborate with musicians. Collaborate with other practitioners in other art forms and other sectors. The person with the deli, it's got the same concerns.
Yeah.
Because these are fundamentals. You know, the same concerns. Where do they do it? Who are their customers? Are they insured? What's the supply chain? You know, can they get fresh bread every morning?
So are there any fundamental differences in the fact that you are a creative practitioner as opposed to a baker or a retailer?
Well, no. I mean, we discussed briefly, and it might have been a flippant remark, but anyone can do business creatively.
Yeah.
It's the products and services that are the defining.
So does our guitarist face any challenges unique to the fact that they are a guitarist looking to enter the music industry, that somebody looking to start an online web brand, clothing brand, might not face, or some example of a more typical business?
Well, I don't think so, and I say that because I'm not particularly experienced in other sectors.
Yeah.
But if you take what we do as an example, you have to take it as given that you can deliver what you're trying to sell.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that's the same in any environment. So if you were practicing law, well, you'd better be good at
Well
it,
read on
or
law,
accountancy,
yeah.
or
Yeah.
baking, or designing, clothing, brand, whatever. Everything else will be generally the same.
But when you arrived here this morning, and we were having a chat before we started recording, we were talking about challenges, weren't we? Challenges that we'd faced or could face. And I guess we obviously felt there was a need to write a book geared towards creative practice as opposed to just business. It's not a business book necessarily. It's a book about being a creative practitioner that addresses the idea of business.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm wondering what those specific challenges might be that a creative practitioner might face specifically, that's necessitated this book and this whole enterprise.
Yeah, I think if I actually think on page 165, top left, who am I? What will I do? Where will I do it? Why? When and how? I think actually it's probably the most important page of the whole book. Stop, slow down. What are the unique factors faced by creative practitioners? Value, financial value in what we do.
Every penny, and you've got to fight for.
Yeah, so
Feels
if I put a stake in the ground and a nice little table and I'm selling cheese and pickle sandwiches, well, that's quantifiable and people pay for it and consume it.
Yeah.
And if sadly I poison one of them, well, I'd better be insured, hadn't I?
Yeah.
So like when the going's good, it's all okay. Let's park that. Let's just imagine that everyone's enjoying the cheese and pickle sandwich. Great. It's easy. It's easy to imagine. It's easy to do. Art, the process that we discussed in the first season, no beginning, no end.
Yeah.
We're about making people feel good. We're about the human endeavour. So in that regard, it might not be any different to yoga or lifestyle.
Yeah.
And there is maybe not for today, but a philosophical journey in that. If we bring it round again. It's furthering a lifestyle. When you give a guitar lesson, this person, are they in the education sector, the entertainment sector, or the lifestyle sector?
They need to know that themselves, don't they?
And so does the customer.
Right. That's an interesting point.
Because, and again, I think there's a psychological contract there that is often misunderstood, and that's why the market research is really important, because the creative practitioner, the guitar teacher, might consider themselves to be in education. The person receiving the service won't. It's a hobby. It's lifestyle. That's why they pick it up and put it down. So you need to be at peace with that rather than at odds with it. If, however, you go and do peri work in a school, that's not lifestyle. That's education. Different parameters, different rules of engagement, different contracts, different pay structures, different business.
Is the nature of art as a predominantly skill-based enterprise unique?
Say that again.
So this afternoon, when we've finished here, I'm going to do a bit of practice.
Yeah.
Now, without meaning to sound pretentious, for hobbyist musicians, practicing is a hobby. They do it sometimes when they can. For me, I essentially schedule it as a professional activity because if I don't, I won't be able to do some of the projects I'm engaged in.
Yeah.
And I've often felt, I mean, drumming is hard. It's hard. And some of the things that I want to do, I have to practice for. And I wonder if to what extent that necessity to improve one's skill simultaneously with one's business is unique to the arts. You know, if you are I'm trying not to belittle any particular business, but there are many businesses out there that are not necessarily skills based. You can buy and sell things, or you can trade certain things. You see what I mean? There are services or products you can offer where you don't need to spend 10 years developing a skill just in the product.
Yeah, that's a really good point. There's two things in there, two really big things, umbrella point. And then you could go off, you know, rabbit warrens thereafter. But there's communities of practice. So take a car as an example.
Yeah.
The person driving the car isn't the person that maintains the car necessarily.
Yeah.
Isn't the person that sells the car necessarily. Manufacturers, designs, researchers.
Yeah.
So there's a whole community of practitioners, researchers, designers.
Come together to form the car.
Just to form the car.
Yeah.
Just so that you can drive the thing.
Yeah.
Then there's a whole other industry of insuring it.
Yeah.
Right.
And preparing the roads.
Yeah. So an entire community of practice just to do that one simple thing where you just get in, switch on, and off you go.
Off you go.
The curse of the creative is also the charm of it, is that you might have to do all of it. But the curse side of it is along the way you'll invent things that never needed inventing. But that's the fun of it. Yeah. That is the fun of it. Don't be put off by that. You know, we even in this podcast series, we have to be careful that we don't put people off. It's a lot of fun doing this, but it takes a lot of time and a lot of money, even if the money's not seen or spent.
Yeah.
It can be money not earned, not realised.
You were saying earlier when we were sitting on the patio outside about being a chameleon, having so many different hats to wear.
Yeah.
In this, I know that's not necessarily unique to the arts.
No, I see it. The reason I see it is because I'm looking for it.
Yeah.
But I can go to a high street supermarket to buy some bread, or I can go on the high street and I can see the word artisan.
Yeah.
Where somebody's like, try that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's different bread.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So there's a creative and a passion in that, rather than servicing the need for the general public that well, you know, we know that we need X million loaves of bread in Britain today. So again, who am I? What will I offer? And who will I offer it to? Doesn't have to be a lot of people. It only needs to be a lot of people if you need to make a lot of money.
Maybe that's a good topic for next time. The role of money in a professional business that is arts based.
Yeah.
I've hinted at it today and elsewhere. There are easier ways I could make more money than I make now, but that's not the point.
No. Ease versus nice versus the sense of fulfillment.
Right. But at the same time, as we also said, if I don't make at least a certain amount of money, the art will stop.
Only because you're in the zone that you rely on the art to live. If you could be, and the reason I want to drop this caveat in is because if you are that 22-year-old who's on day one, week one, and like, right, I'm going to be a creative, well, then you already are.
Yeah.
The second that you need 100% income from it to live, it is business.
Yeah.
But if you can be a potter or a canvas artist or a musician or a dancer and only have a percentage need for your income or none. You still might need a business to govern it, as we've discussed, but you could be happy in that you earn your money over here because it facilitates this, and you feel fantastic about that.
So maybe that's something we can pick up next time then, because that's a really funny place to end. But I think it's a good one. It's like a cliffhanger, because on the one hand, it seems like you're extolling the virtues of not requiring or not relying solely on an art form to make your money. Yet here we are both doing so, and written a book about doing so.
Yes, but I think I agree. I think it is a good place to end, because I think all of the takeaway from this episode is, who am I? How can I do this? And if my goal 5 years hence is to do it full time, well then how do I get there?
And maybe there's in that there's a should I?
Can I? If not today, doesn't mean you can't forever.
No.
Or shouldn't forever.
No. There are many successful artists who have done it part time.
Yeah.
Or have done it completely unprofessionally.
Yeah.
And yet still produced great art. But yeah, let's pick that up next time, because I've got a few points to say about that for myself as well.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any closing comments? I think you summed it up well.
Yeah, I think I'd end there. Nothing further to add today.
Nothing further, no further comment. Well, The Creative Practitioner is out now, physically, digitally, and on Kindle worldwide. Check it out if you're interested. And you can reach me at jonathancurtis.co.uk. paulhose.com.
Yes, indeed.
Questions, comments, emails, suggestions, feedback,
Get to the point, man.
criticisms. Well, thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to welcoming you on Season 2, Episode 2 next time.
Indeed.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Paul.